Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. A lot of people are looking forward to the opening of Dune Part 2 in theaters in about 1 month from the time that I am recording this video. And I suspect that many are wondering whether or not the movie will break even or not. But before proceeding, I'd like to ask everyone to please like this video, please subscribe to this channel, and please press the bell to receive notifications. Thanks! One of the first things that we need to know in order to project whether Dune Part 2 is going to break even or not is the film's production budget. Unfortunately, a definitive number hasn't yet been reported, but I have seen numbers ranging from as low as $122 million to as high as $200 million. The production budget for the first movie in 2021 was $165 million, which sits almost exactly between those two values. So if we consider the two movies' runtimes of 156 minutes and 166 minutes respectively, we could guess that the production budget for Part 2 might be around $176 million, which is based on adjusting the $165 million cost for the first movie at 156 minutes for a movie that's 166 minutes long. So I'm not claiming that $176 million is an accurate number. It's just an approximation that gives us a starting point for estimating whether or not the movie might break even. And with that approximation, we can get an idea as to what the break-even point for Dune Part 2 might be by multiplying the approximate $176 million production budget by 2.5 and 3.0 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, as well as the additional costs of marketing the movie and other miscellaneous costs that the studio pays above and beyond the production budget. And when we do that, we get an estimated break-even point ranging from $440 million to $528 million, which is somewhat more than what the 2021 Dune movie needed in order to break even. We also have a range of predicted domestic opening weekend box office revenue recently released by Box Office Pro for Dune Part 2. And that predicted range is between $50 million and $75 million, which is potentially quite a bit more than the $41 million that the first movie earned during its domestic opening weekend back in 2021. But the real question is whether Dune Part 2 will earn enough box office revenue globally in order to break even. To answer that, we'll first project what the movie's final domestic box office revenue might be, which means that we'll need a range of possible average weekly drops to calculate the projection. In a franchise situation where there are multiple movies from which a franchise average weekly drop can be calculated, along with a standard deviation to create a range, there's only one previous movie in this particular situation. Hence, I will use the previous movie's average weekly drop of 37.86%, but I will only use a range of plus or minus 2.5% away from that, due to Box Office Pro using an even narrower range than that, as well as the predicted domestic opening weekend box office having a very broad $25 million range. That creates a range of possible average weekly drops from 35.36 to 40.36%, which when applied to the predicted opening weekend box office ranging from $50 million to $75 million, it yields a range of possible final domestic box office revenue of $123.9 million at the low end, $165.1 million at the mid-range, and $212 million at the upper end, which is slightly higher than the $195 million at the upper end of Box Office Pro's projected final domestic box office. Thus, both my and Box Office Pro's projected final domestic box office numbers are higher than the $108.3 million that the previous movie earned domestically in 2021, which is a potential good sign, but depends on how well the movie also does internationally. And the 2021 movie earned a lot more internationally than it did domestically, to the tune of it having a very low domestic share of only 34.19%. In other words, 2/3 of the total revenue earned by the 2021 Dune movie came from overseas. And Part 2 is going to need to earn as much money as it can from overseas to reach the current estimated break-even point range. So, using the previous movie's domestic share as a midpoint and plus or minus 5% from that to create a range from 29.19% to 39.19%, I can project possible final global gross box office revenue for Dune Part 2 ranging from $316.1 million at the low end, $482.8 million at the mid-range, and $726.4 million at the upper end. Of the numbers within that range, the mid-range projection of $482.8 million has the highest probability of occurring, and as you move away from that number in any direction, the probability drops. So the projected values at the lower and upper ends of the range are the least likely to occur, and anything beyond those is even less likely. But what's also interesting about the $482.8 million mid-range projection is that it sits almost exactly in the middle of the estimated break-even point range that I had based on an approximate production budget for the movie. If the movie can earn at least $64.8 million during its domestic opening weekend, and its average weekly drop and domestic share don't deviate too much as compared with the first movie, then it would have a reasonable chance of at least reaching $500 million in global gross box office earnings. With the current projections, I think it's very likely that the movie will at least earn $450 million. So if the movie's break-even point is no more than $450 million, then it has a very reasonable chance of breaking even. If its global gross box office earnings do reach $500 million, that will definitely increase the likelihood of the movie being able to break even. Currently, the movie's projected final global gross box office numbers don't suggest a high probability that it can reach $600 million. Now, I'm not saying that it won't, but the odds aren't currently in favor of that happening. And I also don't believe that the movie won't at least break $400 million because the odds don't support that either. So while I cannot definitively say that Dune Part 2 will break even at the box office, I can say that it has the potential to break even, provided that its production budget is not more than the $176 million that I approximated. Now, as Box Office Pro adjusts its predictions in the coming weeks, that may indicate the direction that this movie's final global gross box office may go. I also expect that the movie's production budget will eventually be reported sometime before it opens in theaters, which will also further indicate whether Dune Part 2 has the ability to break even or not. So between breaking even or not breaking even, my gut says that it probably will, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.